Hey you all, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to the No-Till Market Garden Podcast, episode 20, season 2. Got one of the most fun episodes I have done to date for you all this week. This week's interview is with Zach and Ilana Richards of Levity Farms down there in Atlanta. It was such a joy to edit, and there's just a ton of great info in here about starting a farm, living off-site, leasing, and proper infrastructure. We also talk about the idea of embracing the term minimal tillage, which I think is really cool. Anyway, it is a great episode, and as always, I could not bring it to you without the help of our show sponsors like BCS America.
You already know about the legendary versatility of BCS two-wheel tractors on the small farm. You know it's the most economical and time-saving choice for market farmers, building beds with the rotary plow, mixing amendments with the power harrow, and mowing cover crops with the flail mower. But a BCS two-wheel tractor can do much more beyond the small farm. BCS powers more than 40 high-quality PTO-driven attachments, each with the power and performance of an all-gear drive transmission. Blow snow with BCS's snow thrower, also known as the snow cannon. Chip and shred debris with the chipper shredder. Clean your property with the pressure washer. Irrigate your lawn or garden with the high-pressure irrigation pump. Haul over 800 pounds, including yourself, with a rideable utility trailer. And now, spread compost evenly over 30-inch beds with the all-new spreader attachment. Yep. BCS is pretty much the Swiss Army knife of power equipment. Check out bcsamerica.com for the latest attachments, videos, promotions, and more. That's bcsamerica.com.
Big thank you to BCS. All right, enough from me. Let's get to our amazing conversation with Zach and Ilana Richards of Levity Farms. Zach and Ilana Richards, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks.
How's it going, Jesse?
It is going great. And thank you all for coming. I actually am really excited to get some more Southern growers on here, and I'm hoping maybe you can kind of talk about where your farm is located and the size and the scale and those sorts of things.
Sure. So we're located about 30 minutes north of Atlanta, right south of the Appalachian Mountains in a small town called Milton. We cultivate about 3/4 of an acre, and we have room to expand. We do high rotation production. So that's where we're at. It's really close to the city, so we have a lot of access to sales market streams.
Yeah, that's great. So maybe Ilana, could you kind of describe a little bit of that area for us? What is it? I mean, in terms of like climate, what is the let me say it this way. We're recording this in December. What do you all have growing right now? Are you cruising right through the winter?
Yeah, our field is loaded up with brassicas. We do big brassicas every winter. It's actually our first year. We're really excited about growing broccoli, which is the super winter crop for us. We're in zone, I believe it's 7B. So we have. Well, this year was particularly hot for longer than usual. So this year we had a really early and late, long, hot summer, which is relatively atypical. Normally we've got a solid little spring, good long summer, and then a solid fall before winter. But this year it just felt like summer into winter. We had maybe a week of fall.
I hear a baby.
Yeah, I'm sorry, she distracted me a tiny bit. She's stirring.
No, it's okay. It's funny. If you all heard Hannah and my conversation on this podcast at the end of last year, you know that we're a kid friendly podcast for sure.
Okay, great.
And then so you were talking about the heat of the summer. Does that shut you? Is it hot enough that it shuts you all down in the middle of the summer? Or are you able to kind of keep cruising right through it?
We work through it, and just growing up in the South, we're both born and raised in the area, so we've kind of adapted to thrive in the heat. We work with it. So it was a record year. I think we had 91 days of over 90 degrees. So it was tough. You know, we get there early, work early, finish, take a big 4 or 5 hour break in the middle of the day, and then head back to the farm in the evening. And there were some really tough days there. mostly just growing summer crops, and we would tarp some of the beds, and we really just planned to have a really big fall and winter. So we got a lot of bed prep going. And, I've been considering maybe next year doing a little bit more night farming and getting some big lights out there and just working through that.
Yeah, you mentioned that on your Growers Live episode with Josh Satin, and I'm curious, like, is there a model for that? Are people doing that in your area or in the South?
I don't know, and I'm not sure how it would affect our sleep schedule, and it would take some proper planning. But maybe if there was just like 2-3 days of, working until maybe like 1 or 2 in the morning, or getting out there at like 2 or 3 and just knocking out the work before the sun and then taking a big sleep in the day. We're not sure. We're always adapting. We're always trying new things. So just trying to see what works best.
Yeah, that's great. I love the idea of like this sort of third shift farming. I can imagine that being really hard, but also at the same time, like that period of time right as the sun is going down or right after, to be out in the fields. I know we often do like our bean picking at night because it's so rough to do any sort of bean picking in the middle of the day. We often do it at night if we have a big bean harvest. So it's nice. That period of time, like kind of as the sun is going down is kind of a nice time to work.
Oh yeah. And also like I had one day in the middle of summer and I had to get to the farm at about 3:00. We had massive harvest for deliveries and market coming up. So I got there at 3 and I was harvesting turnips and I just stopped and stood up and it was just quiet and dark. And I thought, man, this is awesome. This feels so great. And then, the summer heat just started pounding us later on in the day, but yeah, there's potential there.
Yeah, for sure. So, okay. So you've mentioned that you're kind of traveling to this property. I want to kind of dive into this idea a little bit. So you're leasing this property, correct?
Yes, we're leasing it from a family friend. And long story short, we wanted to get started growing and we had finished our internship and we were actively seeking for land to rent to start the farm. And an old family friend got wind of what we were doing and offered his land for us to lease. So it's been great. There's a lot of pros and cons, but without living on site, we will wake up at 10:30 at night and say, wow, we left the irrigation on, get up and go. But we do have that solace of being able to go home, unwind, separate from the farm, and get our ducks in a row.
Like Zach mentioned, there have been times where in the middle of the night we wake up and realize we left the plastic open on the cat tunnel or whatever have you. And we've lived as far away from the farm as 45 minutes, and we lived as close as 6 minutes, and now we're living about 10 minutes away, which is perfect. Because we can get there in pretty much a flash. There's not a lot of traffic to get there. We talked to a friend of ours, a fellow grower around Metro Atlanta, who told us that he always wanted to live on site and he finally was living on his farm. And then he started living there and he realized that he preferred not to live on site. Kind of like when you have a home office, it's almost like you can never escape the office. You're always at work. I don't quite know if we would feel that same way, but just again, they're just highlighting the pros and cons to both. But right now, since we've never lived on site, it's our eventual goal and dream is to buy property and live there.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting. So can you talk a little bit about what the lease situation is? Like, is this kind of a trade-off? I know that's a very common lease situation, or are you willing to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the lease arrangement that we have is with an old family friend, and he had wanted a farm on his site for about 6 years and just couldn't find the right person to do it. So when we came around, he basically made a deal with us where we could spend a year getting the farm up and running, and then we would start paying rent for the property. There is a well on site, so that is very helpful for us. And part of the deal was he would maintain upkeep of the well. and we would get the farm started up and start paying rent. So we've had to negotiate some rent a little because it's difficult to pay through the winter months when we're not able to grow as much without proper infrastructure. But overall, it's been an interesting process creating the land use agreement. I had someone from Atlanta who's a farm lawyer, Michelle Namer, help us build the land lease agreement, and that was great. And we threw it back and forth, and now we're just doing a year to year with it. And he seems comfortable with it, and so do we, and moving forward that way.
One of the, I guess you could call it a caveat of growing on rented land is we have not installed any permanent infrastructure. So all of our infrastructure at the farm can be, broken down and packed up, in the long run, eventually when we do buy our own property. But it sort of started because it was our land use situation was that it wasn't permanent, but it sort of turned into part of our charm, part of our story, because we're the sort of the DIY operation, because we built everything. Like, we don't have a concrete floor in a big high tunnel or permanent greenhouse. So it's really changed our farming practices from what some other more established farms who own their property might expect from an operation.
Right, because that's often one of the things, maybe the hesitations for people in leasing land, is this idea that I don't want to invest my time into building the soil and building the infrastructure in somebody else's property. Like, I want that to be where it's going to be. I'm wondering, can you further rebut that a little bit and say what you like about that situation?
Yeah, it's tough because it would be nice to put in a large hoop house and just rock it with some tomatoes and cucumbers in there. But unfortunately, we can't do that yet. However, we were able to get the farm up and going, start making sales, get the marketing out there to start building the name and the brand, so that in the future, as we work and build credit with the business, we can be able to show some years of business tax returns to be able to get a loan to buy some property. So what we want to do with this is really inspire anyone who's looking to get started to look through their networks. Who's got an open piece of land? Is there an old pasture that you can use to just get started? Get started growing, start a small CSA, do whatever you can just to get it going. And then in the future, look into, establishing your own property. So we've had the luxury of being able to make mistakes, and we've made plenty of mistakes, and we've learned from all of them, which has been amazing. So when it comes to purchasing property in the future, we're confident that we will be able to design and install things properly right off the bat.
That was beautifully said. That was perfectly stated. I think
Thanks,
that it's
babe.
actually, you got it, babe. I think it's actually been really beneficial for our operation to start off in the non-permanent location, non-permanent situation, because just like Zach said, we've gotten to see everything. When we got there, it was beautiful, but it was a big bare piece of land. It didn't have any infrastructure except for a gate around the property that needs a little mending. But we've been able to see every single aspect of the farm building operation from the ground up. And just like Zach said, it's taught us what to look for, what we like, what we don't like, what we want to work with when we are looking to buy our own land. And if we just started off buying land in the first place, who knows if we didn't have the experience under our belts to know what we were looking for and how to buy the right piece of land for our style of farming.
Yeah, and I think one really underrated element of, if you're going to jump in and buy a piece of property, that just sucks up your capital so fast. And
that too.
And so have you all been able to kind of use this lease to get yourself prepared to buy land? Is that kind of what you're working towards?
Yeah, absolutely. So we took that first year and really just DIY'd the whole farm. We spent some money on a carport just for our wash pack station, and then really sourced as many materials as we could from our networks of of farmers and people, and we spent years visiting farms and volunteering on different farms, and people had scraps here and there, and so we really just pieced it together and just started growing. And so there were pros and cons to that as well. It got us off the ground. However, we're now going into year 4, and not all, but a good amount of the infrastructure that we put up, just, PVC cat tunnels and top rail cat tunnels, they're kind of falling apart a little bit. So long story short, we ended up over the past 3 weeks removing all of them, and we're about to do a little redesign, rebuild with some Farmer Spring Caterpillar tunnels that we're really excited about. Be a little bit more efficient, a little bit more access inside, and this time I won't be pounding conduit straight into grass, so there's grass growing up everywhere. I'll make sure to take care of that grass first.
Yeah, that definitely makes a difference. And it's interesting that you talk about it that way. Like you said, you're 4 years in and you're kind of already having to replace a lot of that infrastructure. That's, we're
happy to do so.
Sure. Yeah. Hannah and I, we had, we didn't start out with a lot of capital, and that's still a situation. I talk about this a lot, but that's still a situation that we deal with, is kind of like, working off of some of those bootstrapped elements from the very beginning. We're going into our 11th year. And it's tough. Like that can be really tough. Did you all, give us a little bit, maybe each of you could kind of give us a little bit of an arc, what got you into agriculture? You said you did you worked on some farms and that sort of thing. Like, what led you into that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess for me, it started in 2007. I read this book called The Secret Life of Plants by Peter Tompkins and Christopher Bird about plant consciousness. And I was getting really into Eastern philosophies at the time and really just exploring my youth. And Ilana and I met in 2009 in a community in downtown Atlanta, working with an after-school program that was like a permaculture-based after-school program. And we were just living the city life and seeing a lot of music and just keeping really, really close to home. And as that evolved, I decided that I wanted to work in agriculture somehow. So I went to school for horticulture science for an associate's degree in 2013 and found a farm to intern at in North Georgia. There was a permaculturally designed farm called Wolf Scratch Farm in 2015. So I moved up there for the full year of 2015, managing the fields after volunteering for about 6 months, and just started falling in love. And that's when Ilana came on site too.
Speaking of falling in love, we had been friends since 2009 when we met. And in 2014, I had just finished my second attempt at my degree. And so I graduated in 2014, and I had no idea about agriculture, or I didn't really know what permaculture was. And early 2015, Zach and I were still really close friends. And in 2015, he called me up and said he had been working at this farm in North Georgia, and wouldn't I like to come see it? And so I went to visit, and pretty much from the instant I got there, I just kind of like took a look around, and of course it was spring in North Georgia, so it was just probably the most beautiful scene ever on this permaculture farm, with butterflies and beautiful billowing produce, and it was just like the weather was perfect. I mean, it was this like almost unfairly beautiful day, and it just totally captivated me, and so I ended up moving there and working on the farm a little bit. There was a nonprofit that we were working on up there as well. And Zach and I decided, we were both so captivated by this farm. There was a farmer and his wife, and they were raising their daughter on the farm. And I think more than anything, I fell in love with the lifestyle and with just that whole idea, the whole picture of living with a family on a farm, raising a child in that environment, just growing a family in that environment. And so Zach and I we decided that that's what we wanted to do. And then we kind of looked at each other and we were like, well, we should do it together, and kind of just took off from there.
Yeah. From there, we just started devouring content. I mean, every Curtis Stone, every Diego Footer, Permaculture Voices, reading Elliot Coleman, just getting every piece of information we could on small scale farming, and just started piecing the business plan together, and just YouTube every day, podcasts all night, or vice versa. And we spent 2016 building it all together and broke ground and at the end of 2016 on our current property. And during the beginning of that year, we went and volunteered at farms, and we went and met other farmers and started to network with the community and really just hit the ground running.
Yeah, that's great. So was it, when you were studying horticulture, this wasn't like small scale market farming wasn't necessarily on the radar?
No, not at all. Okay, so not for the school itself, but it was for me. I wanted to just get back into the schooling system, because originally I thought maybe I wanted to go into some nursery work. And as I was going through school, I had this really synchro mystical event where I just did a Google search of permaculture farm in North Georgia, and the one that came up was having an open house that coming Saturday. Went up and met the farmer, and we became like huge buds right off the bat. And so I started volunteering once a week, and we just became friends. And I ended up being able to spend that 2015, and I could use it as credits for an internship at the school, which the school I went to, Chattahoochee Tech, they now offer an organic grower's certificate, which is very cool, because when I was in school, the professor was like, man, we're really looking at this, but we're not sure if this is going to be something that's going to stick around, but it looks like it is. So it was good to get the credibility in the discipline.
Hey, you all, quick interruption for me. Obviously, I've mentioned several times that Josh Satin and I will be in San Diego this upcoming February for a no-till intensive with Jared Smith of Jared's Real Food, whose work is really amazing, does these really cool lasagna-style gardening on 3 acres, I think, now. And then Stephen Cornett is going to be there, does kind of a micro scale urban farming, does a lot of his own inputs on site. So a lot of Korean natural farming, a lot of those sorts of things. It is going to be super amazing. I'm going to do a talk as well. And you should check that out at notillgrowers.com/events. If you can't make it to San Diego, or you live over here on the East Coast, consider coming and kicking it with me in Louisville on March 6th and 7th. At the Organic Association of Kentucky conference, also called OAK. I love this conference. It's one of my favorites. I'll be doing a 90-minute talk there on no-till, and I think their early bird special ends like this week, so get on that. That's oak-ky.org. And again, for info on that no-till growers event, the intensive in San Diego, hit up notillgrowers.com/events. Anyway, back to Levity.
I'm curious. I kind of want to get back to a couple things on your property, on the property that you're using now. You kind of mentioned infrastructure and keeping it mobile. What do you have there, and how have you made it mobile?
So basically, we put up in the beginning a caterpillar tunnel, essentially, that was made of top rail fencing, and I just pounded some conduit into the ground and slid those over and bolted those together, threw the plastic on, and it was everything we've installed. We had the idea that we might have to move this someday, just in case. So nothing is extremely permanent. I've got some just Shelter Logic tent set up for storage at the moment. Looking into possibly shipping containers for that, and we have one 18 by 22 carport that's installed, and everything under that is our wash pack station. So that's the most permanent piece of infrastructure that we have. It could be disassembled. It would be, probably the last thing to go, and it was the first thing up. But it's tough not having a lot of storage space around. We've had to just kind of makeshift with tarps and just to keep things from getting soaking wet. But, we also have a lot of wind and, crazy supercell storms that's passed through. So I've learned a lot about keeping things secure and doing my best with that. Yeah, at the moment we don't have anything up because...
Except the carport.
Yeah, except the carport. Because, side story, we had a deer apocalypse this past month and a half. And, I mean,
Attack of the killer deer.
it seemed like there were hundreds of them just getting in the fields for the first time ever. And so we had to almost shut down a little bit, and I had to put up an 8-foot deer fence around the perimeter of the field. And so I took this opportunity to remove all the greenhouses that I had, germinating greenhouse, and then my 2 makeshift caterpillar tunnels for a redesign and a reinstall coming up in the next couple weeks.
Yeah, that's like one of those things you don't really think about with living off or maybe I didn't think about it just living off the property, is not being present to just deter deer from coming in. When you're there, they're much less likely. They'll be there, but when you're living on the property and around your gardens, that is a little bit easier.
Yeah, we had an electric fence set up with peanut butter traps, and that worked for a while. And there was this very special coyote friend who was living in the fields or patrolling it. I would always see his prints, and he must have moved on because he's not keeping the deer out anymore. But they're out now, and ever since the fence has been up, things have just been growing so beautifully, and we're very happy with that.
That's something else that's been part of the DIY learning experiences. We didn't put up a deer fence from the very beginning. We tried, just like Zach said, the peanut butter trap, and we tried, we bought this, I think we got it on Amazon. It's like a plastic wolf's head with 2 red lights in the eyes that glow, and it plays this like howling noise every 30 minutes after the sun goes down. I mean, we tried everything that we heard about, getting this special soap. We heard about putting human hair around the plot to deter the deer. But I think one thing we realized is just there's no substitute for just a physical barrier between the field and the deer. So in the future, that'll be one non-negotiable piece of infrastructure that goes up from the beginning, deer fencing.
And you said so the fence that you did put up, what is it? Is it like the poly wire, or is it hard fence? What is it?
No, it's not a chain link. It's just like it's like a poly mesh 8-foot fence that's rated for, I think, 850 pounds from, I think it was like deerbusters.com.
Nice. Okay, that's good to know. Yeah. It's, and then I think Ilana, you maybe mentioned something about a dog out there. Did you say?
Oh yeah. So we've got a retriever Pyrenees mix, and he's our farm boy named Freedom. He's very, very alert, and whenever we're out there, if there's a deer within, I don't know how many hundreds of feet of the property, but he'll scare him away. He would never bite a human or probably an animal, but he's got a really loud, sharp bark that scares deer away. And he's, if I was saying, if we lived on site, I think he would definitely deter any animals. When we are there, Freedom likes to take, as soon as we get to the farm, he likes to take a little trot around the field, and he kind of sniffs out where some intruders may have been, and he'll leave them a little token of his affection so that if they try to come back that way, they'll be deterred. But that's another thing about night farming, is if we were there in the evening when the deer are most prevalent, Freedom would probably scare them off. And then if we were there a couple nights in a row, the deer might get the idea and not try to come back. But it doesn't matter anymore because now we have deer fence.
Right. Yeah. I mentioned that my dog had just passed away, but one of the things that we've never had any deer fencing up here on our property, and it's about an acre, well, about 3/4 of an acre in production, and we've never had any deer issues. And I think it's almost, I can attribute a ton of that just to our dog hanging out outside all the time and wandering around and barking. And
we love dogs so much. They're just such a huge part of our lives, part of the family. And all of our plots at the farm are named after old family dogs. So, if we're out in public talking about our farm and we're talking about, hey, did we wheel hose in it, the aisles? Or, hey, we got to go pull the dancer plot out. Everyone's looking at us like, what the heck are they talking about? But it keeps it fun, keeps it lighthearted.
Yeah, that's great. All my plots are like 1, 2, there's 4. Yeah, it's not very exciting.
What about 3?
Yeah, 3's okay.
Well, what's kind of funny about our farm is we have like Zach, like I said, all the plots are named after family dogs, except for our caterpillar tunnel, which we just call cat. So it's all dogs and cat.
Oh, good. I love that.
Have a little balance.
So I'm hoping maybe we could talk a little bit about soil practices. And one of the things that I sort of mentioned before we got going, and that I like about your farm is that you call it minimal till, and I think this is like a term that I don't see a lot of people using, and but I think is a great term. So do you want to kind of describe what that means to you and how it manifests in your soil practices?
Yeah, absolutely. So to break open a new plot, we usually will till it just to kind of break up the grass. There's a lot of grass in our fields, and all of our plots are separated from each other because our property is terraced into 3 levels. So all the plots are standardized to 25 by 50 feet. So we can fit 6 beds in there. So with each plot, we try out different practices and we try out different things. So we do say minimal till because we don't want to disrupt the soil, but sometimes we have to. There's been times in the past couple of years where we just we've taken on too much and we have a plot that gets out of hand and the grass and weeds just grow up top, and so it's tough. We weren't sure what to do, so we would run over with the mower and then hit it with the BCS just on second gear and with the tiller up high, and just run over that a couple times and throw a tarp on it. We've seen a lot of benefits of some of our plots that we haven't had to till since the beginning. And we do use a tilther from Johnny's just to get a really nice seed bed because we do a lot of direct seeding. And we use a broad fork to kind of go through and open up the plots, open up the beds. But I think we're only going to be doing broad forking maybe once a year per plot because it's a lot of labor. So as we've progressed with the farm, we've had to till less and less. So that was kind of instilled at the beginning of our setup that we weren't going to be doing that much disruption. As we were starting the farm, we were getting really into like Elaine Ingham's work and the soil food web, and we read the book Teeming with Microbes, which was amazing. And we really started to see that the soil itself was a full living organism, and that the vegetables are just a byproduct of like a really healthy lifestyle that's going on under the ground. And keeping the balance of everything there is not an easy task, and it's hard to really monitor. And we've done soil tests in the past, but I've started to just use my intuition, and I'm still learning. We're only 4 years in, but I'll just look at the soil and see like, okay, this might need a little bit more compost. It's a little hard pan here. We might need to go ahead and break this up one more time, just with the broad fork. We see some grass coming in. It's like, okay, we need to maybe just like tarp this plot for maybe a couple months and just try to kill this out. We're always trying new things. And we've also planted and transplanted in landscape fabric, and that's helped keep the weeds down. So if we do break open a new plot, what we'll usually do is instead of doing any direct seeding there, we'll go ahead and do landscape fabric transplants for maybe a year just to keep the weed seeds down. I was inspired by the last podcast I heard with you, the guy who had the 20 acres of no-till, which is an amazing podcast, by the way. That guy was great.
Dan Ostenbrink of Local Harvest. Yeah, he's great.
Yeah. Dan, that was awesome. And he said, and this made a lot of sense, that when he would break a new plot, he would go ahead and till it 3 or 4 times. So he would till it, and then he would let the weeds and grass grow, and then till it again until it was all gone, and then just layer like 6 inches of compost on top and just go into that. And I like that. You have to exhaust the weed seed bank. But then there's the idea of like using cover crops as almost like low-lying cover crops as ground cover too.
That's what I was just thinking. That's one thing we haven't tried that I've been hearing on podcasts and reading a little bit about. That sounds really interesting. because it suppresses weeds, but it also gives back to the soil all in one fell swoop.
Yeah, I think that's one area that really needs to me that's one area that really needs a lot of development is the use of living covers and living mulches. There's been a lot of work on it, but it's not been maybe adapted as well as we need it to annual vegetable production. Everybody, if you've ever tried those dwarf white clovers, they're still too tall for most vegetables, and so there's definitely a lot of people working on it. I think that over the next few years we're going to see a lot more of that, and I'm excited for that as well.
Yeah, but I don't think it would work too well, or I guess it wouldn't work at all with things like direct seeded radishes, turnips, or arugula beds or baby kale or even like paper pot. So
yeah, which is something we haven't really talked about with you all yet, is like the kinds of crops that you're focusing on. Do you kind of want to get into that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So we grow mainly for chefs. So about 80% of our sales are to restaurants, and we do a small market. And we focus on a lot of baby cut greens like arugula, baby red Russian kale, and we do different types of mizunas and different types of like red frill mustards and things of that sort. Yeah, and we do a lot of different types of salads, like salad heads, and we love the Salanova. It works great. And we experiment with crops. So every season we try to grow like one crop and see how it goes, see how it works. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Try to grow parsley root. It didn't work, but we grew celtuce, and it worked awesome. And there's a really huge exploding food scene going on in Atlanta, and these chefs are just amazing, and they're just so deeply appreciative of the food, and they like the newness. They like the new fresh crops that they don't really get to see too often. So we try to experiment with those.
We like to grow. I tell people we like to grow foods that you can eat raw. So lots of salad things, carrots, radishes, hawker eyes. But we also grow a lot of what I call our specialties, which are those weird new crops that Zach was just talking about that the chefs go nuts for. So it's a pretty broad spectrum of crops that we grow, and we're constantly trying new ones on our property.
We found like Mexican sour gherkins have been just a huge hit. We really like tetragonia. It's a heat-tolerant New Zealand spinach that just grows so nicely. It's just such a nice, hardy green for like the middle of summer. It grows great down here. It's huge. I'm trying to think of some other ones that we've been growing. We're trying some Romanesco this year, some cauliflower. That's been growing really nice.
What's the name of that specialty cabbage that we tried this year?
Oh, the Caraflex. It's like a mini,
so great,
really dense cabbage head.
Oh, right. Is that the one that kind of is cylindrical, sort of?
Yeah.
Kind
of looks like an endive.
Yeah, that's cool. I've always wanted to grow that. I keep seeing it in catalogs, or I've seen it in catalogs.
Oh, yeah. It's growing great.
Yeah, that's cool.
Well, because because our space is relatively limited, it's about, oh, bless you, baby. It's about, oh my goodness, you hear those baby sneezes? It's because, what was I saying? So we're growing on a little over half an acre. I think it's about like 0.7 or 0.6 acre. We don't have a ton of space. So like giant melons and winter squash aren't really in our wheelhouse. And in fact, part of the reason I was so excited about broccoli is because we hadn't given too much time and space to growing broccoli in the past because it takes so long in the ground. It takes up so much space. But that's one reason why we try one or two new crops a year, but we kind of stick to what we know works in our soil, like the cut greens and the salad that we know is a pretty good return for a small amount of space while still expanding our repertoire.
Yeah, it's great because we can have a steady supply of a good amount of greens and a good amount of roots, and then we offer, a nice specialty crop on the side, and the chefs will just kind of use those. And when it comes to summer, we, being in the South, we just love tomatoes. They just grow so great. And we had a really banging tomato year. It was awesome. And we're really excited to do some more. Lots of little onions and stuff. But we also do custom. So we had a chef who says like, hey, I want a bunch of tatsoi for the fall. So get that going for him. And we won't put it on the fresh sheet, and it'll just go directly to him. And that's kind of what we want to gear more towards in the future, is really close one-on-one relationships with a handful of restaurants and grow custom for them. And basically having not even have to send out a fresh sheet in the future, just like working directly with them and saying, all right, we're going to have this crop for a month and a half. Like, we'll go ahead and bring this amount in a week and run it on the menu. Just minimize some time for that.
Yeah, that's cool. And then you all do a lot with community outreach. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. So we got our start in the scene in Atlanta because we knew someone who was managing the small new farmers market downtown. And the organization is called Community Farmers Markets. And that was our first market. And through that market, we were able to network with other farmers and other growers, organizations, and other agricultural groups. We also met our first restaurant chef, who became our first client, and just kind of took off from there. And that's something that I feel really lucky or blessed to be connected with to be growing in Metro Atlanta, because Atlanta has Georgia for that matter, but Atlanta has a really strong community of growers who organize themselves into coalitions and host conferences and all kinds of fairs and events, because it's so easy for farmers to be doing the work that we're doing and to feel really isolated and separate in their own operations, especially for growers who aren't traveling to do markets or deliveries, who have someone else who work their markets or run their deliveries. And I think that's part of why Atlanta has such a thriving agricultural scene, is because all the farmers work together and hang out in a fun way, in a social fun way, but also share ideas and tips and seeds. And I can't imagine being a successful farm without such a strong farming community around us.
There's an organization called Georgia Organics, and they've just been such an amazing resource for all types of things, for just the business side of farming, for outreach, for working with chefs, and for getting connected, and just general support and enthusiasm. So as small farmers, this isn't easy work, and there's not a whole lot of money in this, and it is all about the lifestyle. And when things get really hard in peak summer, and you have these organizations and groups of people saying like, hey, you guys are doing great, we're proud of you, we're excited about this, it really gives us a good boost of energy to keep moving this forward, because this whole small scale family farming, small urban farming movement it's growing fast. And I guess it's like revolution, it's taken on the whole massive monoculture system that's been there. And it's a positive thing. It can provide jobs. It's happy and it's healthy and it's exciting and it's fun. So, we always recommend that people, if they're getting into this, to reach out to local clubs or local organizations and just start the network. It's great when you meet farmers who have been doing this for, 10 times as long as you have, and they just have tips and tricks and resources, because every area is different. And so every farm has its own context, but when you start to meet the other farmers in your area, they can start to share about the soil and things of that sort, and where to get the good compost and the secrets and stuff. So it's a big part of it.
Well, and because farmers, being surrounded by successful small scale and or family farmers, you're surrounded by people who are also passionate about the lifestyle, because I can't imagine being successful in this lifestyle if you're not passionate about it. And because farmers are generally passionate about what they're doing, as opposed to other areas of industry where different companies might see each other as competition, and are not willing to, network and share tips and secrets and go, volunteer work exchange on each other's farms and laugh about all the trials and tribulations and learning experiences, because farming is inherently going to be an industry that's full of people who are really stoked about what we're doing. It just fortifies those networks and fortifies those connections. People don't see each other as a threat and as competition, or not trying to sabotage each other's businesses. Everybody wants to lift everybody else up, because if one small farm succeeds, that means farming in general is succeeding a little bit better, which means all farmers are succeeding a little bit in general.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's that sort of abundance mentality that I think has farmers have embraced it. And maybe that's because abundance is so relative to what we're doing. But But yeah, just I feel as though this field, more than any others that I've been close to or been in, is one that's more supportive of the people around it than others. And I'm often thinking, like, how do we continue to cultivate that?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're doing a great job with that, with this podcast. I mean, we learn so much just from hearing from other farmers and just hearing what they're going through, and it's been a huge part of us getting going, is just knowing that other people are doing it too.
It makes it really fun.
I agree, and it's so fun that people are willing to share, and it's so important because the vast majority of us are just starting out. I mean, even if we're 10 years in, we're really just starting out. We didn't come from farming backgrounds. We definitely need a lot of people to say, like, we screwed this up and this went really well. Maybe you could try this.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. It's staying positive. Like, things are going to go wrong. Things are gonna mess up. And there's been plenty of times when I've been standing in the middle of the field covered in sweat, looking around, just thinking, it's done. This whole thing is over. It's collapsing on top of me right now. I can't take it anymore. And then 30 minutes later, I'm like, oh my God, this is the best thing that's ever happened. The field's great. This is awesome.
Hey, you all, last interruption for me. If you appreciate the show and all the different things we do, consider kicking in a few bucks at patreon.com/farmerjesse. We really appreciate that. You also have the Venmo option, VENMO. You can find us at Notill Growers, & No-Till Growers. You could be like Dean and Jane Malone, who kicked us a few bucks through PayPal to notillgrowers@gmail.com. All that to say, if you like an episode, or if you really appreciate the stuff that we're doing, the videos at our YouTube channel, the podcast, No-Till Growers, any of that stuff, and it helps you out, send us a couple bucks to say thanks. We appreciate that, and that keeps us going and growing. We always work to do more with that money we get from you. So we seek out more information. We can put it up in different ways. And at certain levels in the Patreon page, you get a big shout out on the show. So big shout outs this week to Jean-Martin Fortier, Kevin Keene, Ryan Gosser, Weaver Akers, William Henpen, and Yannick LaPlante. Thank you all, and thank you for everyone who is a patron. You keep this show going and this movement going, and we really appreciate it. So otherwise, back to Levity.
Keeping on the topic of, like, keeping a positive attitude in the farm, as we're working in the fields, if I'm by myself, I usually have my headphones in, and I'm either listening to a podcast or listening to music. And both Ilana and myself have a huge musical background. I was a drummer for about 10 years in a band in Atlanta, and Ilana was our merch girl, and she's the best dancer I've ever seen. And we've been to a bunch of music festivals and just seen music of all different styles. And farming to us is synonymous with music. So it's a symphony in the field, and you have, like, the bass drum, which is maybe, the rhythm section, which is just like the sun coming up and the sun going down and the weather. And then you have, like, the guitar solos, which is like the edible flowers. And, you have the vocals, which are, maybe the salad mix and stuff. So that mindset has really helped us. So when things go a little out of tune, or we have, like, a pest issue or, a drainage issue or something, it's just kind of like going and tuning the instruments and, making sure the symphony is continuing.
Yeah, that's great. I feel as though sometimes, and I don't have a specific one, but those sorts of analogies, when you're really attached to something, you've spent your whole life doing something, like you've spent 10 years being a drummer, being able to relate that to farming makes farming make more sense.
Yeah, it's very rhythmic.
Absolutely.
I've got those little things that I think they're important. Yeah, I love that. I love that specific analogy. It's great.
Cool.
One thing that I think you all have done that, and it sort of seems to be a theme of this conversation, what other farmers, young farmers, often do is they think like, I'm going to save some money, I'm going to buy some land, I'm going to start a farm. And one thing that you all have kind of done is been like, I'm going to go work on a bunch of farms, I'm going to get involved with the community, I'm going to go talk to these other farmers, I'm going to get I guess the horticulture degree kind of came early, but you have a horticulture degree. You did like this, land lease agreement with a lawyer. Like you've gone about starting a farm in a way that is arguably more responsible than the majority of us have, in this sort of young farmer movement. And I applaud you for it, but I'm also interested, like, were you conscious of that? Like, did you want to go about it a certain way?
So yeah, that was the intention of going into this. So it was a modest investment, and we started the farm with about $12,000 and just an idea to get growing and get selling. We knew we were going to make mistakes off the bat, but our initial investment was a big part of it was in our delivery. So basically we bought these really nice blue containers, and we had these decal stickers made with our logo and design, and we started growing some food, and basically we just walked into some restaurants with these nice blue bins, and we had worked in restaurants before, so we kind of knew how to maneuver through a kitchen. We were both front of house, but we knew about how the back of house worked.
How to
so
talk to a chef.
Yep. And so we just went in and started selling the foods and told them the situation, say, hey, we're here for you. We want to start a relationship with you, and we want to grow with you. And a lot of people caught on to it and started working with us. And as we started growing through the years, naturally over the winter, we weren't making as much money. So the first year we had to work and go back into the restaurant industry and kind of pick up some serving jobs, which was totally fine. And we slowly started investing in more infrastructure and tools that we were pretty careful about. We had consumed as much YouTube videos as we could, so we knew a lot about all the tools. And we had a buddy who had a BCS tractor who he let us use and eventually sold to us. And yeah, so starting small with what you have and just getting going and getting growing without thinking too big off the bat, and just knowing that it's going to be growing with you.
I listened to a podcast recently. I think it's an older podcast. I believe it was Diego interviewing Curtis, or they're having a conversation about 5. I hope this was Curtis Dunn who said this, so I'm not misquoting, but there were 5 key aspects that new farmers get wrong when they're starting their farm. And one of them was a lot of farmers, and I guess young business people in general, or new business people, start their business and wait until the business gets going before they invest in marketing and, like a logo, for example, or getting nice bins and basically marketing and outreach. And that is something that we made sure that we got to start on before the business really took off and got big. Is we got a logo. One of the first things we did was we got our logo made, I think, and we got our website. And you just sort of kind of start off knowing that your business is, it's legitimate from the start. It doesn't grow into a legitimate business. So just having that attitude of, yeah, this is our business, and it's, sorry, this baby's making noises. Starting the business, and from the beginning, just like you said, just kind of owning it and knowing that this is going to be it. This is going to be big for us.
Yeah, that's great. I love the way you were talking about it in terms of being a business. Like, I've said this so many times, but it's just not something we had at all in our minds when we were starting a farm, was that we were starting a business. And we kind of had that, like it'll become a legitimate business one day mentality, and it set us back a lot.
Yeah, the business part is huge, and we didn't even realize how involved with business we would get after starting the farm. So we've been using QuickBooks as much as we can. We've taken QuickBooks classes to just really make sure that we're keeping the books and everything as tight as possible, because if this whole movement is going to progress, then we need to make sure that we are able to document that people are able to make a living wage off of growing food on a small scale like this. And the only way to really do that is to keep proper books and make sure you're taking care of expenses and everything like that. So that's been a whole pretty cool learning curve.
Yeah. And another thing that you said, I kind of want to talk about wage, but I want to talk about something that you said that it's sort of in passing that I thought was really important. Was that you kind of took an additional job to get some more infrastructure. I think people are shy about that. And we did it when we moved to our new farm 3 years ago. I went and took some catering gigs at a local racetrack, and it was fine. Like, it afforded us to move, and I was totally happy and proud to do it. And I think that's something like that you just said, we took these additional jobs, and that's fine. And I think it's good to put that out there.
It's part of it. I mean, it's just like when your business starts off small, it's nothing to be ashamed of having a small business. You're just starting. It's what you have to do. Having a second income, or working, another job, or getting some side work. It makes me proud to know that Zach and I will do what we have to do to feed our family and to feed the business and keep it going. And sometimes that means getting income off the farm.
Last winter, 2018 going into 2019, we thought, man, okay, we got it. We saved enough money for winter. We're going to roll through the winter. We have enough for startup. This is going to be great. And then about mid-March, we ran out of cash and we ran out of food in the ground. And it was too late, or it was too early in the spring to really get into a new job. And it was too early to be selling any food. So we were like, holy crap. And it got pretty scary there for a second, but we really learned a lot about each other, and we ended up making it happen. And, that pressure that was put on us financially is it's so important. That pressure, it helps you innovate, and it helps you understand the importance of things. And sometimes it's good not to have a lot of money coming in, because you really get to understand the value of things more. So we had a lot of extra time because we couldn't do anything, but things were still growing in the ground. So we're like, okay, what are we going to do? Well, let's clean all our tools. Let's clean everything. Let's just spend time doing stuff and spend time not spending money. And yeah, it was a learning curve, and we thought we properly prepared again for this year, and then the deer came around. So we're going to see what happens with it, but we have lined up some other options this winter for some work as well. So,
well, and another thing about when you have to get some work off the farm. I mean, when we were working in restaurants, that were within the farm to table network, within the farm to table community. So it was still kind of working for the farm, because we were strengthening our business network and business relationships. I recently, toward the end of my pregnancy, when it was just the hottest summer I have ever known, the longest, driest, hottest summer I had ever known in Georgia, and I was just having a little bit of trouble working out in that heat with my third trimester impending. So I picked up some side work at a farm to table preschool, and that was great because it was not only one of our chef clients that we sell to at the farm, but it's also an opportunity for Levity to become involved in educating the next generation of potential agricultural enthusiasts, feeding them with good local food, teaching them the importance of knowing where your food comes from and respecting the seasonality of different foods. So I don't really look at working, quote unquote, off the farm as something that's necessarily, bad or secret or shameful, because if you work, you get to decide whether what you're doing is feeding your business or is helping your business in the long run or not. And yeah, maybe we've just been lucky to have this big network of opportunities where we can grow the business while also working, quote unquote, outside the business. But I think it's definitely possible.
We think of these things like picking up some extra work is as a negative or as a shameful thing, like you said. But it can be such an opportunity, like you were just saying.
Absolutely.
I mean, one, you can maybe learn a restaurant that you already work with. You can get a better relationship with those cooks or those chefs, or you can learn a little bit more about how to use the produce you are bringing. When I said I picked up that catering gig, we sold them produce later, and I knew how they were going to use it, and that really, that was an effective strategy in that way. So it can be an opportunity. I think that's kind of, especially when you're just starting out and you kind of have to make some ends meet.
Well, and what was extra cool about working with the preschool was part of my role was I was involved with the kitchen, and I was involved with ordering and sourcing the food for the kitchen, as well as coming up with menu items for the kitchen. And so I had already had a few years of experience as a Levity farmer growing and selling the food. And then I got the experience of working in a kitchen who's buying the food. So I kind of have this unique perspective where I've seen how we get the food ready to sell and how we sell it and how we grow it. But I also have an idea for what kitchens are looking for and how it's bought. Actually,
that's a really good perspective.
Yeah, it gave us a really big, bonus of wisdom and experience as a farm that largely sells to chefs.
There's a circuit that farmers can help close when people are dining at a restaurant and they're eating local food. They know it's local, but if they know the farmer too and they know the restaurant, then that whole circuit is complete. The farmer grows it, they can sell it to the restaurant, the chef will turn it into something beautiful, and then the farmer can be there and kind of help serve to the table over the winter. It's a great story for the patrons of restaurants to see that closed loop circuit.
That's another reason. I mean, we love selling to chefs, and we love our farmers market. Zach said we do one small market on the weekends. I guess it's 7 months out of the year or so. And we've talked about focusing more on restaurants and bringing less to market, just kind of strengthening our connections with the chefs. But it is we think it's really important to stay connected with the community, and the farmers market is a great way to do that. Just like Zach was saying about closing that circuit for the people who shop at the farmers markets are the same people who eat in the restaurants in that neighborhood. And so they meet us at the farmers market, they buy our lettuce, they love it. They come back the next week and talk about how they love the food. And then they go to a restaurant and they see our name on the menu, and they know the people who grew this food. So they're eating out at a restaurant, but it's kind of like they're participating in the whole thing, because they know that they've supported the farmers that grew the food that they get to eat. So that's also a really important aspect of what we do, the community aspect of it.
We love people, and we love food and dogs.
And the market is really fun. It's just...
Market's so fun. I mean, even some of the market people that come up to our table, sometimes they'll come up and we'll end up talking for 30 minutes just about anything. And then after that, they're like, well, I still got some stuff in the fridge from last week. Your stuff lasts so long and I was out of town, so I'm good today. And we're just like, all right, that's cool. See you next week.
Didn't even want to
totally fine. Yeah. And it doesn't even, we sell stuff at market, but it's more about just like seeing the people, seeing the community, and just, being out there and just having fun with it. We can't wait to bring our little baby girl there. Something we've talked about, I don't know if this is appropriate for the podcast, but he and I come from different religious backgrounds, and we've ever since we decided we wanted to farm together, we also at the same time decided we wanted to raise a family together. And we talked about, are we going to raise our kids with religion? Are we going to raise them? I grew up Jewish, Zach didn't. And so what are we going to do as far as traditions and things like that? And so we kind of had this mutual epiphany about farmers markets sort of being like our church, and
I don't know if I guess you could kind of call it a religion, is agriculture, and not just agriculture is one aspect of it. It's community, and it's
I love that.
like the farmers.
I love that. That's great.
The farmers markets are
energy.
kind of like, yeah.
There's energy in the food that we grow, and when we're growing the food, it's only us that handle the food and package it and process it and everything. But when we're in the fields, it goes back to the positive mental attitude. We stay excited, and that energy, I think, transmutes to the produce. So, and that goes back to that The Secret Life of Plants and the Plant Consciousness book. The plants retain this energy, and so when the people get this food and they eat it, the energy goes to them too, and then it goes back to us, and so we create this really nice feedback loop, and it's just an amazing thing. We're still learning about it, but it seems more real than anything.
Yeah, that's super cool. I love thinking about it in a broader picture, especially when it comes to things of community. Community throughout history has been such a critical part of farming. You find these farming communities that are out in the middle of nowhere, but they're really vibrant communities. They have really vibrant social scenes because that element of it is as important as anything else they do.
Yeah, it's important now more than ever. I saw a study a couple years ago, and unfortunately, farmers have the highest suicide rate out of any profession. I think it's like 33 for every 100,000 people. And I was like, man, that is crazy. Why is that? And I looked into it, and it's because over the years, as cities have been developing, the farms have been pushed farther and farther out, and they're just so separated from urban centers that, the people, they get left alone, and who knows what happens. So as we move forward in time and we're starting to cultivate smaller pieces of land that are closer to urban centers, children can start to grow up and say, okay, there's my family dentist, there's, the families, or there's our school, there's our family farm. And so the farms can kind of be more nestled into like the communities and the areas that are more populated.
Yeah, I love that. Well, Ilana and Zach, thank you so much for your time.
Oh,
thank you.
Thanks so much for having us.
This has been great. And thank you for everything
on your podcast.
You've done. You're really moving it forward, and we just learned so much from what you do, and the guests that you have on the show have all just been so inspiring to us.
Well, that's great to hear. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jesse.
If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow Levity Farms on Instagram and all the places. We will put up their links in the show notes. Also, subscribe to this podcast wherever you're getting it. Come see us in San Diego. Josh Satin and I are going to be there. We bought our plane tickets, and it was a big ordeal, but we've figured it out, and we will be there. notillgrowers.com/events, or come see me at the Oak Conference. That's oak-ky.org, March 6th and 7th, 2020. All this stuff is happening in 2020. Big thank you to Jackson Roulette and Josh Satin for all of their help. Enormous thank you to Hannah Crabtree, my partner, my wife, my co-farmer, for all her support. Otherwise, thank you all for listening. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Yeah, it's funny. I feel like that's something that I want to cover more. I don't know how people respond to it, but I've been trying to push, maybe not necessarily always going so technical. When it makes sense and when it's important, I do. But then sometimes I kind of just want to have a conversation with people and kind of get some of the broader picture stuff, especially for younger farmers that are just starting out. And because I think all of us use podcasts and these resources as, informational, but also inspirational. So having some of the latter, I think more, some balance of the latter, I think is really important. And I don't know, I do this so much that I want to enjoy that. I want to like have conversations with people.
Yeah. And, we're still trying to figure out our systems. We're trying new things all the time. So it's hard to get like really technical with what we do now, because sometimes I'll use the system for a year and be like, maybe it doesn't work. Maybe I'll try something new. So there's not really a set standard yet, besides just like keep innovating, keep going leaner and leaner.
Yeah, and trying to figure out what's working and what's not, and then slowly, getting rid of what doesn't work. It's a huge process, and we think about farmers as like, oh, we should be ready in 3 or 4 years or 5 years or whatever it should be going, and it can take a lot longer than that. Like when I was talking to Dan Ostenbrink, I was thinking about his acreage, and I was like, I bet you could almost come up with like a calculation of like you're doing 20 acres and having to move that amount of vegetables. So like to get up to your budget, whatever it may be for him, he said he was at like $30,000 or $40,000 an acre. To get it up to $50,000 or $100,000 an acre is probably going to take him, a year per acre of development, minimal.
Yeah.
Like 20 years till he's to that point. I think that would be totally reasonable.
Man, that was such a good one.
Yeah, it was a good one. I thought that was a really great episode. It's fun.
And that's exactly what what we're talking about when we talk about how important it is to connect and network farmers with other farmers. I can't, like before podcasts and YouTube videos, I don't know. I mean, I can't imagine how a small farmer could, back in the early days of the Elliot Coleman days, I guess, before podcasts and YouTube, like that just baffles me and blows me away what he was able to do and develop. And, without podcasts, I don't know how I would be like learning stories about other farmers. Without traveling hundreds of miles to different states and seeing other farms and how they're doing it. It just feels so lucky to be learning to farm in an era where folks like you and Josh and Diego are able to provide this platform for farmers to connect and share their stories and learn from each other without having to physically travel to go see another property. So thank you for doing what you do.
Yeah. Well, you're welcome. And thank you all for just supporting it and letting me know that you like it. That helps a lot.
We hope there's some people out there who are like, man, maybe I should start farming. And we want someone to hear this and to just be like, yep, I'm going for it. Like, this is it.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, it's half business. It's half business and half kind of like a mission. The whole non-permanent, modest investment, the modest investment aspect of it is, it's what we had to work with no matter what, but it also hopefully, like Zach said, can provide someone with the understanding that you don't have to have a massive investment and own property and start off with really huge permanent infrastructure to get started. Just like start growing. We have some friends who have a yard, just like a modest front yard in downtown, just outside of downtown Atlanta. And they just said, screw it. They just started growing and started farming in their tiny little front yard, just wanted to try it and learn. And they are really getting a lot of good stuff out of it. And now they're planning to buy some property because, they want to do it on a larger scale, but they just started in their front yard.
Yeah, that's great.